President Truman once said, "Give me a one-handed economist because all the others say on the one hand, but on the other hand." That is not the case for our speaker today. George Erickcek is a man of conviction. When he decides something on Monday, he still believes it on Wednesday no matter what happened on Tuesday. And I think the game ended technically Tuesday morning, so you could ask him Monday Oregon was going to win. He's still going to have a reason why they're going to win tomorrow. And while most economic reports are like horns on steer, there's a point here, a point there, and in between it's mostly bull, George provides tangible information that will help you succeed in 2015, and if he doesn't, he promises you a bus ticket to get you downwind to Denver. He is George Erickcek, the Senior Regional Analyst of the WE Upjohn Institute. Mr. Erickcek's responsibilities include conducting research on regional economic and employment issues, preparing regional economic impact studies, and he authors the Business Outlook for West Michigan, which you can get right on his website or email me and I can have you added to a list that we send out. Mr. Erickcek received his MA in economics from the University of Pittsburgh in 1982. Also attended undergrad at the University of Oregon, for those of you who didn't know that, which is why I brought that comment up about the game. Please help me welcome the man who was inspirational for Marcus Mariota to leave Hawaii and come to Oregon, Mr. George Erickcek. I'll smoke this right now.
Good morning. I grew up on the Oregon coast, spent 22 great years in Oregon, was able to squeeze in a 4-year program in the 5 years at the University of Oregon, and have been a Doug fan for all my life. And so I will say I come to you a little bit sleepy, a little bit sad, but I will say that we were beat by a better team last night. And so for all you Ohio State Buckeyes, may you have an exciting and varied life as the Ohio Turnpike. Okay, what I'd like to do is talk about this, this economy that we're walking into. But before I do of course have a story about an economist way back when, back in the state of Texas. And this economist was talking to a rancher, and he saw this horse. And I said, "Hey, how much you want for the horse?" And the rancher said, "That horse? Give you $200 for that horse." And the economist thought, that's a good deal. $200 for a horse is really cheap. I'll take it. Next morning, the horse dies. He goes back to the rancher and says, "Hey, I want my money back. This horse was old, I didn't know that, and he died the night that I bought it." And the rancher says, "Hey, all deals are final." So the economist thought about this and said, "Hey, I have an idea." Well, 3 weeks left, three weeks later, the rancher saw the economist walking down Main Street. And so he went to him and said, "Hey, whatever happened to that horse?" The economist said, "Oh, didn't you hear? I raffled him off and made $798 in profit." And the rancher said, "How did you do that?" "Well, I created a raffle. I sold 1,000 raffle tickets. Oh, my math is math. I sold 500 raffle tickets at $2 each, and it happened." And the rancher was amazed. Didn't anyone complain? I mean, the horse was dead. Yes, the winner, by getting back his $2. That was my first time with that joke. It'll get better. Okay, so what do we have? The national economy is speeding along on $2 per gallon gasoline. I guess it's $1.90 where I buy it. The robust cars and truck sales are fueling the Michigan economy. Ottawa County had a great year. Ottawa had a great year in 2014, and our forecast calls for additional growth in the future. And indeed, if we do take a look at the national economy for just a second, the third quarter, a robust 5% growth. I mean, that is in the territory of China. I mean, it's a bad year for China, but it's something that you expect to see in China, not in the U.S. It's outstanding growth. If you take a look at the components of that growth, it was uniformed. It was you and me going out there buying things we don't need. It was business community buying things so they can make things that we don't need. It was the military spending. It was exports. It was a lot of things. It was not centered in one. It was uniformed. It was great, and it came after a very strong second quarter. Now, the forecast in green is coming from the University of Michigan, but I could pick any forecast, and it says the same, that 14 will be followed by 15 and 16, which look like very good years. Most forecasters will not go beyond 2 years. Someone asked me to think about 2017, and I'm starting to think about it a little bit, but usually we only look at the next 2 years. Now, the red line is employment, and this is the real story. In 2014, nearly 3 million people got jobs. 2.95 million people in the U.S. got jobs. In the third quarter alone, 80,000 people got jobs in the third quarter. So this was truly a phenomenal growth that we have ever seen. And the unemployment, 5.6%. It's getting down to that level where people are talking about, is this full employment? We'll talk about that later. And more importantly, the number of people who have been long-term unemployed, those individuals have been unemployed for 6 months, which really does take a step out, a bounce out of your step. That's down to 32% of the unemployed, and that's still very, very high, but it's down from 37. So things are looking good. As a matter of fact, if we do take a look at the number of job seekers per jobs, that is the red line. This is good news. Right now, about 2 job seekers for every job being created in the U.S. overall. That's pretty tight. It's not as tight as it was before the recession. You can see before the recession, it was 1.5 job seekers for every job, which is extremely tight. Okay, so I've now been hearing more than once that some employers claim that if you can fog up a mirror, you're in. So we are getting to that point where labor and talent are becoming issues. We're getting to that point where the community that has the talent will be the community that wins. And so, because we're getting to that level where the number of job seekers per job is getting very low. The environment is also set for further growth because of interest rates. And indeed, you take a look at interest rates today, they are continuing to be very, very low. Right now, we're looking at the 10-year Treasury bill, and it's about 2%. 2% is the price. If you take a look at Japan, their 10-year Treasuries, 0.26. 0.26% for a 10-year Treasury in Japan. In Germany, 0.46. So when you take a look at that 2% return on a T-bill for 10 years, that's exciting. Of course, if you really want excitement, you can go ahead and get the 3-month Treasury bill for 0.0001%. But look at mortgages. Mortgages also down below 4% now. So we're seeing a very, very, very attractive environment for interest rates. And indeed, when we look in the future, the real problem is the red line, the blue line, which is inflation. You look at inflation, right now inflation is running about 1%. About 1.3%. Now, that's bad news. Most of us in this room, I look at you and you look like you're my age, you remember that inflation was something that we feared and something that we lived through. And while we were living through that, we were having a buying mentality saying, I better buy it today because it only increase in price tomorrow. And so you constantly wanted to go out and buy things because you thought the price was going to go up. When we have too low of inflation, then many in this room, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I think some of you are going to wait till it's on sale. I think, I could buy that gas now for $2 a gallon, but I think it's going to be about $1.80 pretty soon. I can buy that shirt for $40, but I think I'm going to be on sale. I probably get another one free. And so that's what happens with deflation. We start postponing our purchases, which is not good for anybody. And that's why the Federal Reserve really wants that inflation rate to be up closer to 2%. And they're having a tough time doing it. Worldwide, we're having a battle with deflation. We're having a battle with prices falling. Now, that's not true for Brazil, but for the developed countries, that's true. And that's going to be a major problem as we go forward. Now, consumer confidence. The golden number for consumer confidence is 100. Okay? If you already have a reading of 100 consumer confidence, either measured by the Federal Reserve, by the Conference Board, or by the University of Michigan, 100 means that you're feeling good and you're somewhat stupid. You really will kind of buy stuff that you really don't need, but you really kind of want. The exercise machine, yeah. Especially this time of year. The truck, if only your wife would let you. Others. And that's really good for the economy. So right now, you can look at consumer confidence, and it's getting close to 100. Now, we don't want to be above 100. Then we're talking about the 1990s. The 1990s, we were 130, 140 in consumer confidence, and we were basically punch drunk. But we don't want to be there. But as we get closer to 100, the consumer confidence that we all need, go out there and buy and buy and buy some more, is starting to come into effect. What's interesting is that not all polls were the same. When the elections were going, you noticed that they were doing a lot of polls about how people felt about the economy during the election in November, and a lot of people felt bad about the economy. Even though the numbers looked all positive, they felt pretty lousy. Why is that? Well, I think it's because of the real hourly earnings, which is that flat line at $25. That has not changed over the last 5 years. So real hourly earnings, adjusted for inflation, has not changed. So people are getting hired, but what's surprising, even this day of job shortages, of talent shortages, we're still not seeing increases in wages to speak of, which is a mystery and I think could slow the economy down. Okay, so let's sum up. The national economy was surprisingly strong. Inflation, low interest rates, low gas prices will stay low for the year. And gas prices, remember, we always think of gas prices as a tax, and it is. It's something we all have to pay into. When that lowers, that means we have more money to spend elsewhere. Wages remain flat. The Federal Reserve has stopped its bond purchasing program, but likely will keep keep interest rates very low, and will try its best to try and encourage inflation to heat up a little bit. On the negative side, and this is the third negative that I do want to talk about at the end of the program, the big question about 217, I believe, as well as 215, 216, is it possible for our country, regardless how big it is, to stand alone? And increasingly in the global economy, that's exactly what's happening. Europe is still in pretty much of a mess. Japan has been struggling with deflation for many, many years. China is slowing down. Can we actually stay healthy when all our trading partners and our friends are not? That's a really good question. And I think it's one that may cause us to slow down, not next year, not even in 16, but maybe in 17. Okay, let's talk about Michigan. Michigan, cars, what can you say? It's all cars, and cars until 2017. The unemployment rate is down to pre-recession levels, still higher than the nation though, and growth is expected in 15 and 16. Okay. Okay, so you take a look at the bubbles, and you look at you look at Prudhoe, that's manufacturing, okay? It's green, it's big, it's growing. Boy, it sounds like a monster movie, doesn't it? It's big, it's green, and it's growing. And that is manufacturing for the state. You see the other bubbles, you see professional, by the way, the size of the bubble is the size of the industry in the state economy. You saw a growth in government, which is somewhat surprising. You saw a growth in leisure hospitality, professional services, but basically it's Jupiter with manufacturing. As a matter of fact, in economic development circles, we talk about the multiplier effect. The reason why people like economic developers want to attract manufacturing is because it usually has a multiplier effect throughout the community. It brings new dollars into the community. Those new dollars are then spent on Main Street and in the malls and in the health centers, and so that's why we attract manufacturing firms. Besides that, we do manufacturing extremely well here in Holland and Zeeland. So if you're willing to accept in the state of Michigan that for every manufacturing job, 1.8 additional jobs are generated statewide. So, okay, if you're willing, hey, you can become economists. That's what we do in economists. We just make assumptions. If you're willing to make an assumption that, yes, George, every manufacturing job, every auto job, every furniture job, every food processing job, I can imagine that you put that all together, they could all support about 1.8 additional jobs each. If you believe that, which I think is very believable, it says that in the state, all job growth last year was due to manufacturing. That manufacturing is powering the state forward. And that's kind of sobering. But it shows how important manufacturing is. And so many times when things are rough, people say we should step away from manufacturing. And I say we cannot step away from manufacturing. We're simply built to make things. And fortunately, I think we do a great job doing it. So that's where we are, driven by manufacturing. And here we are with car sales. And not only that, but car sales are expected to continue to be strong in 15 and 16. Back up to the rates that we saw back in 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, when we were cruising at 16.2, 16.4 million units in car sales. Truly outstanding. Why is this? Well, according to those who know better than I, a couple of things. We still have a pent-up demand. I think some of you in this room are still driving pieces of junk. No names, but, you really do have people that love you and they care about you, and that thing's a death trap. The second thing is, according to one analyst, from the 14 and 15 period, there are going to be 130 new models with new gadgets and new safety features. And think of the F-50, a 150 truck with aluminum. And then finally, interest rates low, incentives are good. Indeed, the new car, used car ratio is positive for buying a new car. So everything looks really good. The only downside I can see with the auto industry, and it's so true with so many other things in life, it's the kids. The kids aren't driving as much as we did when we were kids. I wonder why that is. Remember when you were a kid, you couldn't wait to be 15? Heck, I didn't wait to 15, I was 14. Just to drive that vehicle. And kids today really don't have that desire. And so what we're seeing is, in terms of demographics, that the current kids, the people in their 20s, are not buying vehicles the way they used to. Now, part of that could be because of consumer debt, student debt, but still, that's a problem. Okay, there's the unemployment rate. Notice it's really dropping. In November, it dropped to 6.7%. That still means about 320,000 residents in Michigan are unemployed. 320,000, okay? However, at the same time, job growth was extremely high. So we're still in really good shape. Unemployment fell by 80,000, and the number of people with jobs increased by 120,000. So a good forecast as well. The University of Michigan thinks that they're going to grow 50,000 jobs in 15 and about 52,000 in 16. So there's the climate. The national economy looks really good. The state economy looks really good. The stage is set for a great year for Ottawa County as well. The unemployment rate is dropping, and it's dropping for the right reasons. It's dropping because the residents are finding jobs, as we'll notice. Manufacturers are driving this economy as well. The county is coming back due to its competitiveness, and a little analysis that I'd like to show you. And then forecast, more of the same, continued growth. So let's take a look at the unemployment rate. Right now it's 4.3%. I don't know, most economists would say, boy, that is full employment. You can't get much below 4.3%. I think you will, but you can see that's really, really tight at that rate. It's very close. You can see that right now we're at the unemployment rate that we saw back in 10 years ago, maybe even 12 years ago. That's how good it is. And then if we break those numbers down, look at the last year, 2014. We're looking at November to November, change in the labor force, change in employment, and change in the number of unemployed. So if you take a look at the far column, you see that during this time period from November of 13 to November of 14, the number of people unemployed fell by 2,524 to be exact. Now, that's great news. Now, why did they fall? Well, they fell because look at the number of people who got employed. These are employment by residents. This is residential employment, people who live in the county. 9,148 residents got new jobs, That's outstanding. That's huge. That's a monster. And because of that, it was able to attract about 7,000 people into the labor market. So a lot of people who had given up think there was no jobs for them. A lot of people who were doing other things outside the market, those who may have been going to school, those who are coming, maybe moving into the area, but mostly those who really thought that the economy had changed and they just wasn't a job for them, they're coming back. So not only were we able to bring in 7,000 people from outside the labor force back into the labor force, we're able also to relieve the unemployment rolls of 2,500 workers because of the job growth that we've experienced. This is outstanding. Now, I will say this is residence employment. This is employment by residency. How many people who live here have jobs? That's not what we use as a measurement. What we measure is how many jobs are created in the county. And here, the number is smaller, but still relevant. During the third quarter of 13 to third quarter of 14, unemployment increased by 3,800 jobs in Ottawa County. Truly outstanding. Truly outstanding. What is the cause? Well, let's take a look at Jupiter. There it is. It's big, it's green, and it's growing, just as we saw in Michigan. And here we see everything almost exactly the same. And indeed, when we take a look here, we can say that if you accept a 2.6 multiplier for manufacturing, that it's a smaller economy, so for every manufacturing job in Ottawa County, 1.6 additional jobs would be created. Manufacturing is powering us as well. We take a look at those manufacturers, and we can see where the growth taking place during the most recent time period we have. And you can see it's in food, fabricated metals, furniture, computers, electronics, machinery. Now, transportation was down slightly, but only by about 100 jobs. It's a very large sector, but it did turn red, as you notice. That's Mars down to the left, to the right. But still, it's a very diversified set of industries that seem to be overall growing. We take a look at job postings. Here's good news as well. Look at the job postings. This is job postings by the internet. And we have these web spiders going into and picking up all the job postings listed on the internet. And you can see the job posting changed, and this is changed from 13 to 14, manufacturing. Which is truly remarkable because manufacturers are known not to use the internet. Manufacturers are known to have referrals as their standard way of hiring new people. Hey, Joe, do you have a friend or someone who can work here? Yeah, I think I do. I'll bring him in next week. Well, manufacturing is changing that model and using the internet more. And look, most of the large growth in jobs in manufacturing. Transportation, warehouse, hospitality, education services. Where are we seeing a decline? Real estate, administrative waste, and mining are very, very small sectors of the economy. So indeed, the manufacturing sector is growing very well. And if we take a longer view picture of what's happening in Ottawa County, here we look at from 2000 to 2014, and indeed in 2014, Employment in Ottawa County is 4,000 greater than it was in '07. In other words, the horrible Great Recession is over. We now have more jobs than we had back then. We have more jobs in the county than we've ever had before. We have fully recovered. And that is truly remarkable. And if you take a look why that is, the green line, you can see that is in services. Right now, if we do a benchmark of 2,000, number of people in service industries from retail, education, leisure, healthcare, professional, business services, all those folks, it's 10% higher than it was in 2000. 10% higher than 2000. Truly outstanding. Well above the state, matching the growth rate in the nation. Then finally, take a look at manufacturing. Again, we're the green line. You can see that we're outperforming the nation in manufacturing. Here, we've just reached our 2007 level, so manufacturing has also came out of this horrible recession, is now at the same level in terms of jobs as it was before the recession. However, it's still well below what it was in 2000. So we know that manufacturing is important. We know that it's growing. We know it has a multiplier effect. But at the same time, the long-term trends for manufacturing is downward. And that causes a problem for us in Ottawa County as well as the nation as a whole, because it's hard to convince young people that there's good jobs in manufacturing when they listen to some economists giving them these long-term trends showing how manufacturing employment has been dropping over the last decade and will likely continue on the long run to be relatively stagnant, even in Ottawa County. But the problem is that our manufacturers need skilled workers. To me, that's the challenge for Ottawa County. How can we convince young people that there's really challenging, fun, rewarding work in manufacturing? Because manufacturing needs these people to be able to compete and stay strong. Okay, now the one thing I was thinking about is when we look at these patterns, the question comes up, is Ottawa County's success during this recovery from '07 to 14, well, I only have data for 13. So is the success from '07 to 13, is it because of one, Ottawa County is simply following the coattails of the nation? Okay, so as a famous economist once said, tell me your industries, I'll tell you your future. So if you have a set of industries, then you should grow as those industries grow. Okay? And so is that what's happening? Is it because we simply have a good set of industries that are experiencing positive growth and that's pushing Ottawa County forward? Or is it because Ottawa County is simply doing it right? That Ottawa County has economic competitiveness. So what we did, and I've always said, forecasting is extremely difficult if it's the future. We did a little test and said, okay, let's pretend. That's something else we do as economists. We do a lot of let's pretend. It goes along with the assumptions. I can tell you about the can opener joke, but I think you've heard it. So there's this chemist and this physicist and this and this economist, and they're on a deserted island, and there was a bunch of canned food, but no can opener. And the chemist and the physicist and the economist are trying to break the cans open on rocks, on the trees, and they can't get these cans open. They simply cannot get these cans open. Well, they're starving to death. And one day on the beach, the chemist says, guess what, guys? The chemicals on the beach, believe it or not, with the power of the sun, I can make an explosion. I can blow the top off these cans. And the physicist said, this is really exciting because I can really allocate how much of this explosive you need per can and where it should be placed on the can so that we have the least amount of spillage. Well, these two guys were pretty proud of themselves. And the economist was listening and said, no. First, let's assume we have a can opener. So I asked myself, if I was in 2007 And I had the job of forecasting Ottawa County's growth from 2007 to 2013, not knowing anything about the future. How would I do it? And the best guess I would have is that I would do it by saying, well, I would look at the industries, the types of manufacturers, the types of services, the types of government that is in Ottawa County, and then look at what the projected growth is for those industries, and I can expect Ottawa County to do the same. That would be my forecast, and it would be wrong. So, if you did that, if you just did a forecast of trying to determine the growth that will occur in Ottawa County from 07 to 13, what you would see is Ottawa County should have dropped about 27,000 jobs. It did not. That's what it would have done if it just followed industrial trends. If it did no better than the industries if it's mixed nationwide, we would have lost in total employment 2,720 jobs. In fact, we gained about 40 jobs. What is that difference? That difference is competitiveness. That difference means that firms in those industries in Ottawa County were taking share away from their competitors in the same industries, that they were out competing. Then I looked at the export sector. The export sector are those firms in Ottawa County that make goods and services that are sold outside the county. Now I call it exports, but we're talking about exporting to strange places like Ohio. Okay, I'm also talking about going overseas as well, but we're talking about just exporting outside the area. Now, here in our export industries, if my forecast is just looking at trends and saying there's no reason why Ottawa County should do any different than the national trends for their industries, I would be wrong. Because indeed, I would say that we would have lost about 1,960 jobs. In fact, we lost about 140 jobs. So indeed, even though the bottom line to the story is even though the numbers show that we didn't grow from 07 to 13, and you could say, well, that's bad. The answer is no, that's not bad at all. Because to reach those levels of stability meant that your employers, your companies, really did a great job, really outperformed their competition. And that's why from 07 to 13, you had stable employment instead of what I would have predicted, pretty massive drops in employment. So that's really good news, and it's pretty strong evidence showing that indeed competitiveness is right there in your DNA. Now, I want to make sure that it's competitiveness and not cost. However, when we take a look at full-time production wages in Ottawa County, I know that low wages are attractive, but we also need to have spending power in our community. So we take a look at production wages in Ottawa County from 07 to 13, and you take a look at the 10%, those are what I would call unskilled workers, and the 90 percentile, those are your highly skilled workers. What you see is wages have not changed for any of them. Wages have been flat. And take a look at 12 to 13, across the board, there's very little movement whatsoever. In the low skilled, you can see a slight rise, but that's statistical noise. That's statistical noise. So basically what we're seeing is we aren't seeing that wage growth yet as of 13. Okay? Now, I will say that as we do go forward and stay competitive, I want to remind everyone, as I do every year, the importance of education. And indeed, I was just looking at the annual income in Ottawa County of people in 2013, by individuals of their education attainment. And we usually have a table of unfortunate students, but I don't think we have that this year. I always want them to see this. You can take this home and show your kids as well. You know, if you drop out of high school, it's not that you won't find work. You probably will, although the unemployment rate's relatively high. It's just that you're going to be working long hours for little pay. And you can see through the lines how there is a growth in earnings with education, to no surprise. Now, as for the composition, and there's a slide in this presentation which I chose not to put in, but I should have, and that is when we look at what percent of the workforce, 25 to 34-year-olds, those young people, okay? Now, you might want to ask, why am I looking at 25, 34-year-olds? I mean, I really don't like them much. They're young, they're smart, they have energy, and they want my job. But the reason why we look at 25 to 34-year-olds is because they can choose where they want to live. They still have footloose fancies. They still want to locate where it's cool to locate. And we want to be able to make sure that we attract high-skilled, high-trained workers. So of our 25 to 34-year-olds, the number with associate's degrees, the percentage of associate's degrees, is around 10%. So 1 in 10 have associate's degree. 33% have bachelor's degrees. That's not bad. That's the national average. So right now, Ottawa County is basically at the national average. The national average is around 31 for bachelor's degrees. So we're at 33%. So it looks like we're able to attract talent, young talent, 25 to 34-year-olds, about the same as the nation. And that's good if good enough is good. If good enough is not good, and I hope everyone in this room would say, no, good enough is not good. The most dangerous thing is the word good. Oh, that was good. I don't know, it's supposed to be great. That's something to work on. How can we up the number of young people who live here to have associate's degrees, which are really good degrees to have in manufacturing and technical trade programs, or bachelor's degrees? And that is a challenge all of us must face. And indeed, we do take a look at unemployment rates. You can see that the unemployment rates are exactly what we expect. 18% for those without high school, dropping down to near zero for graduate programs, okay? So if you have that master's in English, don't give up. Go back to school. Okay. Now, do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see the beginning of a U? I see it, beginning of the U. You might ask yourself, this is construction, this is building permits. You might ask yourself, why are we stopping from 2013? And this is something that's going to impact a lot of data for Ottawa County. As I said last year, slowly, and it's more slowly than we thought, but slowly Ottawa County is being absorbed into the greater Grand Rapids metropolitan area. And as that continues to evolve, we lose more and more data. So instead of having metro data, which is current, and so if the Census Bureau still saw Ottawa County, the Holland and Grand Haven MSA as a unit, we would have 2014 data. Unfortunately, do not. That means we have to use county data, which is only released on an annual basis. So we do not have 2014. However, the news reports that we've been following in the local newspapers suggest that there are a lot of building activity that's going on. So we surely expect that when 2014 data does come available in a couple of months, it will continue that U-shaped recovery in construction. Indeed, I will say, as we did the forecast for 15 and 16, this is the first time in 3 years in forecasting Ottawa County that we put positive numbers in construction. Before that, we kept it flat as a pancake. We're starting to see, due to the data here, as well as the anecdotal data that we're seeing, that indeed construction is coming back, residential is coming back, and we're certainly hope that people buying those houses are young, smart, and don't want my job. Okay, So, how's the forecast? Well, wait, how did you do last year, fella? Well, if you remember last year with the tuxedo, you also remember that I was here saying, hey, I have a free lunch because this MSA is over and I can give this forecast and there will be no way for you to check how good it was. I was wrong. Indeed, this year, MSA data for Ottawa County stayed input. And so we do have the possibility of looking at the forecast, and this is what we did. And to be very honest, I was too timid. Last year at this time, I thought that this year was going to be a great year. 2014 was going to be a great year, and I estimated 2.4% growth. In fact, it was 3% growth. So we underestimated it. Where was the mistake? Manufacturing was the mistake. Construction was a little bit positive, but it was manufacturing. Manufacturing skyrocketed 4.1%. I never saw that coming. We thought it was going to be 2.5%. Now, the test of any good forecast is how you do on the private services. And government is always tough to forecast. So I'm not quite sure where that 1% growth in government happened. It might have been Grand Valley. Grand Valley is doing extremely well. It's one of the best, I think it's one of the best universities in the state, and it's growing. So that could be caused of that. Could be other reasons, but indeed we thought it was going to be -2, and it's 1%. So that's our track record. Like I said, we nailed private services. Okay. Now, looking to the future. Brian Long's Purchasing Managers Index indicates stable manufacturing conditions. If that index stays above 50, that 50 mark, it shows that manufacturing continues to grow, and it's been doing very, very well. So that seems really positive. We take a look at what Michael's in the audience. Dunlap, his MADA index, very positive. He associated that with employment in the metropolitan area of Grand Rapids. Both of them look really positive. Indeed, BIFMA has released its new forecast and thinks that production is going to be strong. Michael was telling me that whereas it's not official and it's just rumors, that the results of his next survey of stakeholders in this industry is going to be positive. So it looks like manufacturing, office manufacturing is going to have a good year, and that's great news too. So given all that, here's the forecast. Whereas it grew 3.3% last year, we expect it to grow, but again, we're a little bit conservative. What can I say? 2.4%, 2.5% for goods, and that includes manufacturing and construction. Services, we're going 2.8, and then we think the government's going to be still flat. Continuing on to 2016, growth continued to grow, be in 2.6% range, 2.7. And I will say that, unfortunately, this will be the last year that we'll have data on the metropolitan area. So we will not be able to come back next year and say how we did on these. So we just have to assume that they're spot on. But given the fact that my track record is one of being too timid, I have a feeling that 2015 is going to be a very good year for Ottawa County. So let me wrap up so we can have some questions. The global economy, what keeps me up at night? Well, the running back of Ohio State. You know, the first 4 minutes of that game were so sweet. So what keeps you up at night? The global economy. We really can't be the only game on the planet. I don't know if we can do it alone. We are seeing changes in Europe. Our austerity plan that they've been following. They seem to be stepping away from maybe being a little bit more progressive, not progressive, but a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? What have you. That's embarrassing. A little bit more expansionary in terms of their monetary policy that may help. It may not. Japan has always scared me. When people ask me what's the long-term outlook for the U.S., I always say, look at Japan. Japan has been struggling for 10 years, and it's a very strong country. It has extreme talent. It's done so well, and yet it's got itself in this deflationary funk that it just can't get out of. So that's my first concern. My second concern is income inequality. There seems to be very little improvement with that. And the problem with this is that it's not a good calculus to grow the economy. The way to grow economies is have a strong middle class. A strong middle class can really power economy much more effectively than an economy where the very, very wealthy are doing much, much better than everyone else. And indeed, when you do look at the numbers coming out of the Congressional Budget Office just recently, it shows that most of the income gains that have been experienced over the last 5 years have been to the top 5%. And that's, I don't care if that's right or wrong, I just know that for running the economy and getting the economy going, that affects consumer purchases. And then finally, and it's just to close on the fact that we will be losing the Holland Grand Haven MSA this year. They gave us another year, which I'm truly fortunate of, but indeed, as we move forward, we're going to have to look at other indicators to monitor how well your economy is doing, because I truly believe it's going to be a great couple of years. I hate to see that buried in the statistics. With that, you're most kind, and thank you. Okay, I've been told that we have to get out here at 9 o'clock, but I'm really happy to say that we have some time for questions. And for those who have answers, please give them. Yes?
There have been different philosophies governing this recovery, both at the national level and the state level. Can you point to any particular policies that you believe are largely contributed to why we are where we are?
So the question is that there has been governmental policies both on the national level and state level that have been advocated. And can we say anything about the influence of these policies? And indeed, when we take a look at the state, one of the big changes last year was the state became a right-to-work state, which was a huge policy shift. And there's substantial tax cuts in government. At the same time, for businesses. At the same time, on the national level, we saw Obamacare, which seems to be effective in increasing the number of people with health insurance, but people were very concerned that it would curtail job growth as employers would slow down job growth. The data suggests that, first of all, the concerns on the federal level certainly is not reflected in the data. The fact that we were able in 2014 grow 2.95 million jobs suggests that something else is happening. And indeed, where I think government policy is important, and I think that the tax cuts were positive, I have a feeling that the economy powers its own. That the economy is ready to grow because of pent-up demand for autos. It was ready to grow for other factors. And so when I think about government policy, I think about the captain of a ship who's sailing in the North Atlantic Sea, and a passenger comes up and says, "Captain, if we hit that iceberg, what would happen?" And the captain said, "The iceberg would keep on moving." And I think that's the same with I think that's the same with our economy, that the economy is so big that changes in government policy are relatively small given the strength of the overall economy. And right now, everything was pointing in the right direction for this growth to occur. Yeah?
What do you see happening in the health services sector? Last year, I think we talked a lot about that. We thought that was really going to increase, and we all felt real good. Grand Rapids moving in health services. And I don't know if Obamacare affects that at all, but what do you see happening maybe in the Ottawa, Kent area?
So what we're seeing, and we have conducted focus groups in areas in Muskegon and in Grand Rapids, and in healthcare services, we are seeing contradictory trends. The first trend is we're getting older. There's nothing to do about that. So more and more are seeing doctors and medical providers, but we're seeing them in different environments. So we have seen actually employment in hospitals to actually be flat, if not declining. Plus, we're also seeing consolidation in the hospitals. Spectrum, of course, in Grand Rapids, Bronson in Kalamazoo. And so what we are seeing is that the hospital, and you look at employment by hospitals, by the major hospital facilities, they're relatively flat, if not down slightly. But what we're seeing is growth in outpatient care. And so we're not, with Obamacare, with more and more people having insurance, we expect to see greater growth outside the hospitals as people finally have the chance to get a checkup. You know, I've been going for 10 years. I didn't have health insurance. Now I have health insurance, and I can really find out what is this thing? And so we expect that more and more people see doctors, but that will be outside the hospital. So I think growth is expected to continue, but outside of the major hospitals. And that's something we're seeing nationwide. Yeah?
It might be an obvious answer, but Ottawa County is pretty much in line with the United States for manufacturing. What in the state of Michigan brought the state of Michigan back?
So what was interesting is when it was brought down during the recession. Yeah. So what brought down the state during the recession? It was cars, plain and simple. The car industry went flat, went belly up. And indeed, if you do take a look, if I could show that, because this slide is also enjoyable for something else too. Okay, whoops, just had it. That was a huge drop in auto sales. And you see that little tower right in the middle? That's cash for clunkers. And that says a lot about federal policy. But that was a huge fall. What was really amazing with Ottawa County is what kept you up. And what kept you up was food processing. Food processing is the most stable manufacturing sector that we know. It's not that when things are good, it's not that you have 2 portions of strawberries, but you keep those strawberries coming during the bad times. And so it's extremely stable. And that's why Ottawa County, I think, did better in state, because you had more diversified manufacturers. And in large point, it was because of food processing. Now, since Michael's in the room, I will say that one of the strengths that we have now, as this economy continues to grow, is that you have a very strong presence of the office furniture industry, which has always historically been a lagging industry. That it's not until things are really, really good, and you're feeling really confident, that you take a look at that piece of furniture that you've been sitting at, and that chair that is driving you crazy. And so we usually find that furniture sales happen later on in the cycle, which means in 15, 16, maybe even 17, this area is going to have that sustainability as well as the furniture industry starts kicking in when all other industries are starting to stabilize. Yeah?
Increase in wages. You've got a concern for deflation. but the signs in front of businesses and even billboards advertising employment at a given wage, as we're all fighting for attracting and retaining employees, the wages are going to creep up, have been creeping up. That doesn't happen in a vacuum because I don't have the ability to pay my employees more and not charge more for my goods or services to my customers. So it seems to be a slow growth in wage, but for me personally, I think we're seeing that here in 15, which will change the deflation picture, I would.
I think you're absolutely right, and I would argue, if people ask me, no, am I for the minimum wage? And the answer is, nah, not really. What I really want is good, strong growth that causes wages to go up. And indeed, it is. I think if we had current data, 2015 data, on the data that we've been seeing, we're seeing wages are starting to increase, which is a good thing. In some areas, we're seeing wages increase dramatically. And we're seeing good old-fashioned job jumping, where people just go from one job to another because it's an increase in wage. And I have nothing against that. I mean, I want more wages. Now, your point about that being, what will that do with inflation? And here, I guess I step away a little bit. There's two arguments about what causes inflation. One is it's a supply side argument, saying that it's the supply side. When costs go up, prices have to go up. I, on the other hand, believe it's more a demand side, that inflation is a attitude. It's an attitude that we in this room create. That when we start changing our purchasing habits, that we expect prices to be up next month, that's when you have inflation. So I think inflation is really driven by us in this room. When you start thinking, you know, I better buy now because it only go up in price, then we know we have an inflationary spiral going. If you're saying, I'm going to wait till it's on sale, then we will not have deflation, we will not have inflation. So I have a feeling that, yes, I think the only way we can increase wages without major changes in tax policy, which I would not be that opposed upon, but without changes in tax policy, is to grow the economy so that we start seeing those wage bumps occurring as they are occurring in 2015. Yeah, in the corner. Oh, and then I see you too, okay.
George, recently one of the leaders of the oil-producing companies in the Middle East said that they do not expect to see oil at over $4 a gallon again. I'd like to get your opinion on a long-term basis, how that's relative, also to our deflation concerns, and secondarily, the impact of natural gas and what you see of that in the future.
You know, those are really good questions. I'm reminded of my father, who told me at a very young age, it's a wise man that knows his limitations. I'm a regional guy. I don't know if I can really speak regarding energy prices. I saw the exact same comment saying that he did not expect the prices that we see in gas go this way. My feelings are, if prices keep this way, I wonder about the Keystone Pipeline. When you look at the price points of Canadian shale, and prices stay too low, Canadian shale may not be as cost effective as it looks now. And as for natural gas, I think natural gas is so cheap right now that I still expect to see fleets slowly but surely change over to natural gas. We're seeing that with some of the larger fleets. I think FedEx is doing it, maybe UPS. So I see natural gas prices staying low and people starting to make adjustments for that as a fuel. But as for oil prices, I really can't predict. I just think that it's going to cause a slowdown in some of our domestic, more expensive oil activities. Okay, down here, yeah, go ahead.
Could you speak to the population trends that you see for Michigan? Is there enough good news that people are starting to get back to offset the black hole that we had of Michigan?
So yeah, the question is about what are we seeing about population? The state of Michigan is not uniform. And so when we look at population growth, we're looking at very strong growth on the west side of the state And we're seeing good growth in suburban Detroit. Every place else, not so much. And so I think that's one of the challenges. So right now, I think that when we look at growth, the data I've seen in terms of population growth, West Michigan is doing pretty well. Now we're not Texas, okay? This is no joke. San Antonio, Texas uses Waco as a population growth measure. This year we added 2 more Wacos to our metropolitan area. Think of that. Using another metropolitan area as a growth measure of the population gains in your metropolitan area. We grew 1.5 Wacos.
First, I want to add something to your comment about the growth of the furniture industry. I do have a question. Much of the growth that we've seen in the last 7 to 10 years has been in expanding markets such as education, healthcare, and now even hospitality. The office segment itself, it may actually be still the decline, if not just stable. So it's because of the diversification that we've seen a great deal of the uptick. My question has to do with foreign investment. We get a lot of media coverage anytime a foreign company comes and invests since you're a regionalist, we try to keep it local. Examples such as Modus with LG Chem, so on, the list goes on. We very rarely ever hear about U.S. foreign investment elsewhere. Do we have a net gain or a net loss, if you will? In other words, are we getting more foreign investment in a regional basis than what we are investing elsewhere?
I do not know. It's a very good question. And you know, Michael, that's a great question, and I wish I had the answer to it. One more. I know in the back the woman has been very patient.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have thoughts on the role the cost of housing plays in the economic outlook.
You know, compared to other regions, our cost of housing is really cheap. So right now, even though it may seem high to us, for people that move into the area, we look like a bargain. So my feelings are right now, housing prices may be to our advantage. When people move in from Chicago or move in from the East Coast or move in from the West Coast and see what they can buy here, I think they're always very impressed. That's not the same as Texas, but I think that right now, even though it's increasing, it's still, relative to the other national markets, is still pretty good.
Wonderful. George, thank you so much for your insight. Wow. Oh, hold on. Don't go anywhere. We have this fantastic wooden bowl for you from the Holland Bowl Mill, and it's filled with goodies from the peanut store, of course, a local favorite. So here you are. Thank you so much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.